Hello, everyone. In this podcast, we will be discussing sensitive topics such as sexual assault. It's important to take care of yourself while listening. Some suggestions are listening while you're in a healthy headspace or knowing who you can reach out to if you become upset. Our 24/7 helpline for crisis calls based out of Central Florida is 407-500-HEAL. By contacting the national hotline at 1-800-656-4673, you can get support and learn about your local resources. There's always someone ready to help. Center podcast. Here we sit down with professionals that serve survivors and victims of trauma or those who've experienced violence and have conversations about social issues. This week, we are talking about gender boxes. My name is Emilie Mitchell. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the education coordinator at the Victim Service Center of Central Florida. With me today, I have Robin Daly. Robin uses they, them pronouns and is a non-binary trans masculine person. They are the current housing program manager at Zebra Coalition and has been with Zebra for a little over 4 years. Robin works with the 18 to 24-year-old population in Zebra's housing programs and is a certified youth mental health first aid instructor from the National Council for Behavioral Health. So Robin, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me, Emilie. I'm very excited.
And I also have returning Stephen Wilson. Stephen uses he, him pronouns and is one of our crisis counselors and victim advocates at the VSC. He earned his bachelor's and master's degrees in social work from the University of Central Florida. Diversity, inclusivity, social justice, compassion, and respect are all values that he lives by. So Stephen, thank you as well for coming back onto the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I'm super excited about this podcast. This topic is super near and dear to my heart. And in honor of Pride Month, which is nationally during the month of June and locally in Orlando in October, we are hosting multiple podcasts uplifting topics and conversations surrounding the LGBTQ plus community. So on this episode, we will be discussing gender boxes and gender norms, how they can affect everyone, particularly those within the trans community, and what we can do to support people and their authentic selves. And also I wanted to ask you, Robin, can you talk a little bit about Zebra and your services and what you do there?
Sure. So we are a nonprofit organization based here in Central Florida that supports and inspires LGBTQ plus youth 13 to 24 years old. And so how we do that is we have a drop-in center on Mills Avenue that's open Monday through Friday and from 3 to 5 every day. Youth can come in and depending on what their needs are, they can just come in and hang out in a safe, affirming space. But they can also, if they're experiencing homelessness on any level, couch surfing or car or outside, they can come and take a shower, do laundry, get something to eat, and some of the other basic needs. We have hygiene items and things like that. We have counseling. Right now it's still all telehealth, but we have full counseling services available for LGBTQ youth and family. And we also have a housing program for 18 to 24-year-olds, 2 different housing programs. So if someone is experiencing homelessness, they can get in touch with us and talk to us about housing as well. So we have tons of services. We do way more than that, but those are the main ones. And you can just check it on the website at zebrayouth.org to find out more information. And follow us on social media. We have great social media. Our social media person's awesome. So.
Yeah, and I see that you have awesome events too, in addition to all the incredible work that you all do. And you work with youth specifically because they're more at risk for things like homelessness. Is that right?
Exactly. Most of the youth that we see in the drop-in center and with counseling and with housing are youth who have experienced usually some type of trauma based on their identity or their expression um, or their orientation. From usually it's family rejection, is where it starts, and then they end up on the street because of that, and so they're coming to us looking for housing and things like that. But like overall, it would be a whole nother podcast to talk about the youth and the statistics for LGBTQ youth. But if you just look up some of the basic things like depression, suicidal ideation, substance use, alcohol use, homelessness, risky behaviors, um, you can see that it's definitely a higher number.
I'm so glad that Zebra Coalition exists, and VSC works super closely with Zebra Coalition. And it's always like really exciting when we have y'all like on a podcast, or if we're doing anything, any kind of outreach together, working together. And it sounds like you volunteered to be on a different podcast about LGBTQ plus youth. So thank you so much, Robin.
You're welcome.
Very cool. So with that, I think it's important, as always, to start off with some definitions, and we have a lot of definitions today. But I can throw this out and anyone can answer. What is gender, and how is it different from biological sex?
So, I mean, really, you can look at gender in a couple of different ways. It depends on the context that you're using when you're talking about it, right? But it's a range of characteristics, in between, let's say 100% masculine to 100% feminine. It's a range of these characteristics pertaining to masculinity or femininity that we as a society use to kind of define what someone looks like, how they're perceived, per se. That's one way of putting it.
I would add that biological sex is usually the sex that is perceived at birth, and that usually a doctor or a nurse will put on the child. And gender is more about how we feel on the inside and how we choose to express it, rather than what is perceived on the outside.
Absolutely. And that actually brings me to my other question, because I think that as we dive into things like gender, I've heard terms like gender expression and gender identity. So are there differences between those two things, and how would you define them?
There definitely are. I'm going to jump onto what Stephen said for a second there. Thank you, Stephen, for that lead. When we talk about biological sex, also, you now may hear assigned female at birth or assigned male at birth, right? Because when we're talking about gender and we're trying to separate that from the biological sex, sex assigned at birth, and that's something that's, like Stephen said, that someone looks at our genitals basically and says, okay, this is a male or a female, right? Versus how we feel internally, which is what I consider gender. I'm speaking from an individual place. I'm not speaking for the whole trans or non-binary community, but from my personal experience. So gender expression for me is what I look like on the outside, how I express my gender, my feeling of gender. And then identity is how I feel internally. So I can tell you that most of my life, I honestly identified really as a really masculine female, right? But I dressed more masculine. But internally I dressed kind of androgynous, more toward the masculine, definitely not really feminine. And tried to ride that middle line, and but always felt more masculine on the inside from as long as I can remember. So when I decided to transition and kind of embrace my masculinity, I started on the outside presenting more masculine as well.
I would say for myself, gender identity is like, I do identify as a male, but when I express my gender, it's not always masculine. It's one of those things that's very individual based on the person, how they feel and how they feel comfortable expressing it. I am an effeminate man and I enjoy that. So although I identify as male, I embrace that feminine side of myself. That's how gender expression comes out for myself.
Right. And for me, the same way. So I have always felt more masculine, but when I decided to really embrace this feeling and see what kind of what was on the other side of it, at first I thought, oh, there's nothing feminine about me, but there really is. And so that's why I identify as non-binary, because I feel like I always joke that it's 80-20, about 80% masculine, 20% feminine, but I don't reject that feminine part of myself. And because that's part of who I am as well. And I think that that's really what I want people to understand about gender and identity, and that's in the spectrum. I know we're going to talk about the spectrum that it is because we don't have to be in this so-called box that we talk about, right? I've always been more masculine, and now coming to this place where I am, I see it is such an individual place for every person. Just like Stephen said, like, you can't read someone's identity from the out, like it's not a formula, right? I can't just lay out, here's my formula, that the best I can tell you is 80-20. Like you can't read that on someone. And it's different for every person. I believe it's absolutely different for every person. Now, you have some folks in society who would say, I am 100% masculine. I'm 100% a man. I'm 100% masculine. Okay, that's what that means to you, how you perceive that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody might be standing next to you that says the same thing, but they feel differently for whatever reason, or they present differently, And that's where it comes back to, for me, it is all about the individual and how we feel about our identity, our expression, our sexuality, all of that, right? And how we present that to the world, right? It's an individual. I'm a human being. At the basis of it all, the baseline is I'm a human being. I just want to be treated like a human being.
Absolutely. And I appreciate both you, Robin, and you, Stephen, for bringing in your personal experience with this. I think it really adds to the conversation. And I find that people who are listening will find it super beneficial. So thank you so much. You talked about, a lot of these like pressures of these boxes, and we'll get into exactly what that is. But I hear also that people say that gender is a quote unquote social construct. So when they say that, what do you think they're referring to?
When I hear social construct, I instantly go back to the learned behaviors that society puts on us. Going back to that biological sex assigned at birth, like you have female genitals, you're expected to behave, act, and look like a female. And sometimes, like we said, gender is fluid. It's a little bit in between, or, it's a spectrum where like you're not going to identify 100% with female, or you may identify more with the masculine side of you. And those social constructs really come from society. And what I find really interesting is some other religions and cultures and Eastern societies, they celebrate and deitize their transgendered individuals. And therefore, they're celebrated within those cultures and not looked at the same way that maybe some of the other Eastern and Western cultures do perceive them. So it's a good example of how like society really constructs those social constructs within the gender norms.
That is such a good point, Stephen. Robin, did you want to hop in on that?
Just to kind of tag onto that. Yeah. So when we look at inanimate objects and we put gender on them, right? Like colors and clothes and things like that. Or something, it's a pink cup, so it's got to be a girl's cup, or a pink shirt, it's got, I just think that's crazy that, gender is placed on all of these things that it really doesn't need to be. And I think more now more than ever, I realize that living in the place that I live in of non-binary and what that looks like for me, it's just, you can see it through, from the minute someone is born and someone says, okay, that's a female, like there's the column of all the stuff that you should be acting, wearing, doing, saying, working, like boom. And then same for a boy, in the masculine. And when we move out of that, and I know we talk about that a little bit later, but when we move outside of those lines, that's when people are like, oh, you can't do that. You're going against what society believes is the norm, therefore superior, right?
That's such a good point too. Norms being seen as superior. And then I love that example that you brought in, Stephen, too, of different cultures and just kind of highlighting how gender really is this societal pressures that they can put on people as well. And you also mentioned, and so did you, Robin, this concept of gender fluidity. So, when we say that gender is on a spectrum, what are we really saying? And what does it mean to be gender fluid? And how do you define within that gender queer itself? I know that these are a lot of terms, so feel free to tackle them as you see fit.
So yes, I have a friend who identifies as gender fluid as well, but how they express themselves can change on a daily basis. It's how they wake up that morning. This specific person, can wake up one morning and like, I feel very feminine, and they will embrace that feminine side the entire day. And with as far as clothing, expression and everything, but maybe the next day they don't feel as feminine. Maybe they're in that, more middle androgynous side. And then the next day they may be like very feminine. It's just how they're feeling and how they're expressing themselves in the moment. They don't necessarily identify just masculine, just female, or just androgynous. They're on that spectrum, and they are able to express themselves on that spectrum.
Yeah, and thank you, Stephen. And I think that going back to the societies that celebrate almost like a third gender, this in-between gender, right? Like that, somewhere else, that's the norm. Like you can wake up and you can dress, differently every day, and no one gives it two looks, right? It's like they're celebrated. But yet, in our society today, it like when we teach it here at Zebra, when we're doing a workshop on gender and orientation and things, we talk about it being we put it on a line because I believe it is a spectrum, right? And I really don't think it's like 100% this or 100% that. I just think it moves back and forth. I think we all move back and forth. And the best definition I could give is, or example I could give is, think of you're home on the weekend. So maybe Friday you go to work, Saturday you go to the gym or to the park or to work out, Sunday you go to church, and then somewhere in between there you go to the grocery store. Are you dressed the same way for all of those tasks? No, right? We all look different. And especially for females, the dress down is a little bit more toward the middle or toward masculine looking, right? So you could be perceived as someone who's more masculine or more athletic or whatever, just because you're wearing workout clothes. You just came from the gym and you're running through the grocery store, and it's all about, we put such a heavy weight on what people are wearing and attach those labels to that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And while you were speaking, I totally relate to that. There are some days where I would rather wear a skirt than some other days I would rather present more masculine for whatever reason. So I totally see that being relatable to everyone. I think it is the norm that people do kind of fluctuate between this middle ground.
I just want to make the distinction between gender identity and expression and perceived gender expressions. Like emotions are not gender. Like emotions are not attached to a specific gender. So like you can't say someone's a feminine guy because they have emotions and express them. That's completely separate. So gender expression and those type of, just wanted to make that clear separation.
Clapping in the background over here. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think that that's a very important distinction to make, which is why I love that we're kind of going through these definitions, because I'd like to kind of break down those misconceptions. So I think it's also important that we dive into these gender boxes. What exactly is a gender box? What are these characteristics or behaviors within these male and female boxes that we put people in? Things like that.
Well, it's exactly what Stephen was saying is, it's these labels that we're given, right? And when it comes to like male, female, exactly what he was saying, that, if someone that's quote unquote masculine or male expresses a little bit of an effeminate, anything really, then there's another label that's put on them, right? Sometimes, and Stephen, you could probably speak to this more than I could. You've probably had this experience just being a gay man, like, oh, you're a gay man, so you're more feminine. The perception is that you're weaker, that, all of these things that are really just made up, they don't really apply when you really start to research it and break it down. Like they don't apply at all. It's not even true.
It's a lot of expectations and perceptions. And it's just one of those simple things, like all it takes is like a simple conversation. Rather than you assuming for someone, you can just talk with them.
Mm-hmm.
And through a simple conversation, even without directly asking, like if someone feels comfortable, those types of things will come out. But rather than you like judging or perceiving them the way you want to perceive them, you're not really truly understanding that person if you're not meeting them on that level.
Following those norms of men should be masculine and strong and not show emotions and not cry and, work hard and blah, 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 and the opposite for, women, you should, women are the ones that show their emotions and they're the weaker of the two. And, cry all the, like all of these false narratives that are placed on us, right? On us as males, females, non-binary, in between, all of these different things that are put on us, that are so, again, they're social, they're placed on by society, right?
Mm-hmm.
For sure. And even like colors, right? So like women are associated with pink and then men are associated with blue. And kind of going off of what you said earlier, Stephen, about different cultures. In the past, like in medieval times, blue was associated with the feminine, and then red and pink was associated with the masculine. So it shows that like that's just, proving the point, right? That like colors aren't gender, and
That's such a good point. Like, as cultures and societies, things evolve and change, and our perceptions of those things also change. So luckily, we're seeing a lot more acceptance of non-binary, trans people, and things like that. But like, let's look at high heels. Those were meant for men while riding horses, right? And now it's a feminine thing, or quote unquote feminine thing. So like, it's interesting how these things change and evolve over time. So it is quite interesting.
That is a great fact.
Yeah, I always forget that. Thank you for bringing that up. That's always like mind blowing, but it shows that like how much we've been kind of conditioned into, these things are feminine, these things are masculine.
Men wore wigs and makeup, full
Right.
regalia, everything, and just things changed over time.
Absolutely.
Listen, I'm in trouble because I couldn't wear heels before and I can't wear them now. So. I could wear them, but I couldn't walk in them.
I still wonder if I can. Don't worry. So when do you think, and I think you kind of alluded to it, Robin, when do we start putting these expectations on people?
So early. I mean, the minute that they're born, the minute that someone assigns, that a sex assigned at birth, this starts to happen, right? Colors, names, clothes, hair, all of it, think back to, the 60s and the 70s. And if a male wore long hair, that was bad. Like there were these, your hair had to be short if you were male and long if you were female. And so even in jobs, careers, sports, all of the, it's all right away, it starts happening. And what my experience and what we have seen, especially probably in the last 5 years, is, we know that young kids start really understanding who they are, in a masculine or feminine or neither, at a very, very early age, right? So when you put the term gender identity on it, youth and young kids start to figure that out very early, 4, 5, 6 years old, right? And people say, well, how can they know that early? We know that. I knew that early. Like, we know that early. What people confuse it with is orientation, which is that comes closer to puberty. That's who we're attracted to, right? How we identify with who we're attracted to emotionally, physically, like that. But I definitely think that it's a very young age that we start to figure out who we are and identify those, how we want to dress, how we want our hair, our names, things like that. I mean, I'm fortunate. I have gender neutral name. I was born with a gender neutral name. Thanks, Mom and Dad. You're awesome. Thanks, Grandpa Robert, because that's who I was named after. So, so I got lucky there, because I definitely would have probably changed my name if it had been a more feminine, acceptable name or whatever.
Yeah, I think that, feminine acceptable, right? Because like going back to like, why do names have genders? That's very, yeah.
I completely agree with Robin, and I will take it back to even in vitro. As soon as a couple finds out that they're pregnant, I want it to be a boy. I want it to be a girl. They have, before the child even gets here, they're planning out names and everything. Before they even know the sex of the baby from the ultrasound, they have a whole list of names for both of them. And by the time the baby gets here, we don't even know what it looks like, what they think or feel. There's a whole nursery set up.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Stephen, because I think one of the first things, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the first things when someone finds out that someone is pregnant or expecting, one of the first questions is, oh, do you know the gender? Do you know if it's a boy or a girl? Like, that's the first thing that we care about, I guess, as a society. And then it's almost like, okay, now I know how to treat this person. Now I know what to buy them, what job they're going to get. It's pretty amazing how it just snowballs from there. And what about the people who stray out of the box? How are women perceived if they are expressing themselves in a more masculine way, for example? What are some of the reactions or things like that?
Well, usually the first assumption is, depending on their age and the environment that they're in, right? So it could be, oh, they're a lesbian, if they're a strong masculine female. If you're talking about in the corporate culture, then maybe they're power hungry, a bitch, like things like that perception, that women aren't supposed to be strong, intelligent people, I think that, and then I think that's the opposite for men. If they don't follow the line of what is quote unquote expected for a male or masculine person, well, then they're weak. They're, gay. All of these. Because of course the label of either lesbian or gay, has to be put on somebody who's straying from the quote unquote norm, outside of that box of what the gender role that's put on them, right?
Yeah, so like going back to like expressing outside of that box, removing gender identity out of that, just like purely expression. Once you get out of those boxes, that's when shame and oppression starts to happen from society, right? Like you no longer are quote unquote fitting in. You're no longer what we find acceptable as a man or a woman. And I 100% agree with Robin about how like women are perceived. On the other end of that, a man wouldn't be called a bitch. A man would have been, called successful, and he wouldn't have been called greedy or power hungry. He would have been called successful once again. Like there's those double standards for male and females based on their perception of gender. Men who are expressing themselves in a feminine way are often looked at as less of a man, right? Like you're not worthy to be called a man because you don't possess this and this, these qualities that we find to be acceptable as a man.
I just wanted to add to that. It's kind of back to what I was talking about earlier, where like there's no test for that. Like show me the test sample. Like there's no test for that, right? There's no qualification for that. If you challenge somebody and say, what do you mean by that? How do you test that theory?
Yeah.
There's nothing, right? So it's not real. It's a myth. It's what is put on us. And I absolutely agree with Stephen that once we get outside of that box, that's where oppression happens, right? And that's where we start to see the different layers of oppression happening, and how, it affects all of us.
I wanted to get into kind of why do you think we have these gender boxes too, but also I wanted to pose the other question. Do you think that there is more of a backlash by society if a man is more presenting as more feminine than if a woman is presenting more masculine?
I do. I mean, I think we see it. I think we see it in the numbers of trans people that are murdered, and the not unbalanced of that. It's mostly trans women who are experiencing that, and I think that all of that, when you stray outside the box and you start doing something that people don't expect and they don't see coming, or it makes them uncomfortable, it creates fear, right? And I think all of this comes from, I believe all of it, the oppression and the backlash and all of that comes from fear. Just like the boxes that we're in, where did they come from? Somebody created them to put people in their place, right? To control and have the power. Because you just talked about the colors earlier and they were completely opposite, right? In a different society. So I believe that a lot of this is put on us so that people can control the outcome, and a lot of it's fear-based. And so when you see youth coming, especially youth today, you see more and more young people really floating in that middle of gender fluidity, right? And not really calling it a lot of youth say that they're gender queer. I'm just queer. I don't want to have the label of male or female. I don't want to have the label of gay or lesbian or trans, or I'm just gender queer, or I'm just queer overall. That's who I am as a person. Like that's really the only label that they're willing to accept, right? They're rejecting all this other stuff. But when you do that, when you see these youth, expressing themselves, and really all it is nonconformity, blue hair, long hair, whatever, it's outside of the norms of acceptability that creates the backlash or the fear, or well, what's going to happen next? Somebody's going to be doing, I don't know what the example would be, but that exactly, that statement, what's going to be next? That's fear.
Robin, you bring up such a good point. I'm going to go back to when you said that you identify 80% masculine and 20% feminine, and that you don't reject that feminine side, which is really interesting. And I don't know about yourself, but it was hard for me to come to terms with my masculine self because I had my own perceived notions of what masculinity was, and I did not want to be associated with that. So that part for me it took it's like we said, it's a journey. It took some time to, to be okay with my masculine side as well as me embracing my feminine side.
I definitely think so. There was a point where I would say, I don't have a feminine bone in my body. Like I was like, and I couldn't figure out how I was female. Like, how was I born a female when I don't feel like I have a feminine bone in my body? And for the longest time, I think I did try to reject it. because I didn't understand what was happening. So when I went to therapy for many years, I came to realize who I am and started embracing, who I am and being authentic and kind of believing myself. It was kind of this organic thing that happened. When I started to transition, I at first would say, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do everything I said I wasn't going to do. I've done because it's a journey. And once you're willing to open up and take a look at yourself, and see things kind of, for me, how they unfolded organically, that was the best way it could happen for me, because now I just kind of let it happen, and I'm like, okay, where are we landing here? And that's where I landed, and I'm now completely comfortable with that, and wasn't sure how society wise, because I thought, a lot of people think you have to go to all the way to one gender or the other, and people think that. So if I say I've transitioned, they're like, oh, and then you get all the questions, but I'm like, no, like, I'm just me. But for me, like, once I embraced that and figured out that's kind of where I landed, I'm so happy about it. I was nervous to kind of tell the whole truth at first. I didn't know what that was going to look like, saying, okay, I'm a non-binary trans masculine. People were like, what the hell is that? Right? How I explain it is, I consider myself non-binary because of the 80-20, right? But I also say transmasculine because I've done some things to transition myself to more masculine than feminine. And I understand what transgender people experience by doing those things. So I do consider myself a trans person. I just don't identify 100% one way or the other. And I don't think anybody has to.
Absolutely.
I think, hearing the word authentic is such a powerful one. I think, you talking about the youth saying, I'm just genderqueer, like, I don't want to even look at those other labels. It's just, to me, what I was hearing is like, I'm me, these are the things that I like, and that's the end of the story. And I think that I wanted to lean in a little bit more about your experience. Robin, and I appreciate you being so candid with us. I wanted to ask you, what is the most challenging thing about being trans?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, you hear about it all the time, and if you haven't experienced it, you wouldn't think that it's such a big deal. But going to the bathroom for me is the most challenging thing, because it can be a safety issue. It can be so my whole point about it is I shouldn't have to think about this. I should be able, I should be able to just find a restroom when I have to go to the restroom and go in and go to the bathroom. But I can't. And I can't believe I'm talking about this in public, but I have to think about what that could look like safety wise, depending on my environment, where I'm at. Some places it's safe, some places it's not. Because if I'm, the word we use is clocked, but if somebody, recognizes or thinks that I'm one thing or another, depending on which restroom I'm in, it could go really bad. If I walk in a ladies' room where I feel comfortable in a ladies' room, right? I just want to go to the bathroom. Somebody be like, "Oh, you're a man, you're in here," and then I get thrown out of there, depending on where it is. Or if I walk in a men's room, which I'm also comfortable in, I'm just going to the bathroom again, and somebody says, "What are you doing in here?" Whatever. Like, I could get hurt, like, depending on where it is. So you shouldn't have to think about it so much. You really shouldn't.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that you have to go through that, Robin. It must be completely exhausting, and
It is completely exhausting. And the thing that frustrates me the most about that is it's based on non-truth. It's based on nothing, actually, which a lot of this is. Like, there's a study that was done back in 2018, I think, at UC. I'm sure there probably has been since, but this is the one that I know about. Done at UCLA at Williams Institute, the law school, that totally like refutes access to the restroom for whoever with their gender identity, and the crimes that occur. Like, there's no basis for it whatsoever. I didn't say that exactly right, but you know what I mean? Like, there's no relation between the two. If I choose to use the bathroom that I identify with, it's not going to correlate with any crime, or vice versa. If I was a trans feminine person and I choose to use the ladies' room, there's no correlation that more crimes happen to women in those restrooms because trans women are using those restrooms. Like, it's complete bull, you know?
Yeah, I think you're addressing that myth that, if we allow those who are trans or identify as trans to use their preferred restroom, that it might be putting people at risk for things that are crime related, when what we're seeing is that's absolutely not the case. And that's what I would assume as well. So these, arbitrary lines that we're drawing, these pressures that we're drawing, and this fear is not based in anything that is actually substantially factual at all. So I appreciate you breaking down that myth. I've also heard a myth that, people, well, not a myth, but perhaps, this is a myth, that using the they, them pronouns or gender neutral pronouns is actually not proper English, or maybe someone will say things like, I just can't do it, or things like that. So what is your experience with that, and how would you like to address people who may be unwilling to use gender neutral pronouns?
So for me, I would say the Associated Press uses they, them in a singular form, right? So I think it's acceptable in that respect. Like, the Associated Press will use it, right? Not proper English, the part that doesn't bother me as much as people who say it's just too hard, I can't do it. Like, they just apologize constantly and say, I just can't do it. I just, it's just too hard. Like, really? Like, for me, that there's no better way to like not validate me as a human being and the relationship that we have if you won't try. Like, if you get it wrong and you're trying, I'm good with you all day long, right? But if you won't try and you just say it's just too hard, I'm like, well, okay, I get, there's the value of our relationship.
Yeah,
I think that's really powerful. And we talk a lot about pronouns when we talk about the LGBTQ plus community, and it's honestly like the least you can do is just try. And I appreciate you saying that even if you're trying and you make mistakes, because we're human beings, we were born into this world that pushes these different gender norms on us and our expectations and perception of people around us. And we also have the power to respect people and validate them and their experiences and their preferred gender pronouns, and that's the least you could do in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it's super powerful and affirming when people do respect a person as a person and a human being.
It definitely is. And for me, like, you can say she, they, or he, and I'll probably turn around. Like, I'm fine, I prefer they. And I love it when people do use they, because that tells me that they're paying attention and that they're trying, right? And so I don't usually correct people if they get it wrong per se, depending on the situation, right? So if I'm in shopping or whatever, and it's someone I don't know, and they misgender me, I don't turn around and correct them. I'm just like, whatever. Most of the time now, it's sir, right? So that's expected. But I try. I let people off the hook a lot, because I just don't want to not argue about it, but like, we'll get there. Either we'll get there or we won't. But knowing that when people first started using they for me, even though I said I'm going to use they them pronouns, someone would actually do it, and I'd be like, "Are you talking to me?" Like, because it took a minute to get used to it, right? So I can't come down too hard on people who haven't been around, in this community. I mean, when you're in this community, it almost becomes second nature, right? I actually fall to the ease side of using they for a lot of people, and then it's almost misgendering, someone who is she or he, because it's just, I don't want to misgender somebody, so I'm going to use they.
I do the same thing, Robin. I think that it's, I don't know, how do you feel about that? Like, do you think I tend to use they them because I don't want to assume, and it's just easier, to be honest.
I think it's okay. Like, I'll use it for if I don't know, until I find out what someone's pronouns are. For example, if a youth comes to the drop-in center and I don't know their pronouns, but I'm explaining to someone on staff, this person across the room, I might say they until I know what pronouns they actually use. And we don't say prefer anymore. It's not my preferred pronoun, it's my pronouns.
Oh, I love that. That's such a big distinction.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's my pronoun. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
It's not my wish. It's what it is.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so powerful. Shifting gears just a little bit, I wanted to ask you, Stephen, and we talked a little bit about your experience, but do you have any other personal experience that you'd like to share with society trying to fit you into one of these gender boxes? And are there different expectations? And again, if you just want to add anything to it, if we've covered it all, that's okay. But are there any other specific different expectations put on men who identify as gay versus men who identify as straight?
I would say that there are expectations on both sexualities. If you're a straight male, you're expected to be a provider, a husband, a father, to be there for your children and your wife. Where alternatively, because adoption and things like that have not been in the past acceptable for the LGBTQ community, we don't have that same expectation. So some people, they have the expectation of, oh, well, he's just into the arts and he's creative, like undermining what, who I really am as a person. And alternatively, like there's a lot of the the gay best friend, where you're treated more like an accessory rather than actually being valued for what you contribute and who you are as a person in that relationship and friendship.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Me too.
Wow. Yeah, go ahead, Robin. You had a reaction, so go ahead.
I did. When you said that, the value of a person and I felt it in my chest. Like, oh my gosh, that's so true. I was just going to say, I'm sorry that you've experienced that, Stephen. Like, and I know that I have my own experience in different ways, but like to hear you say that, I felt it. I want to validate it. That sucks.
I agree, Robin. Yeah, like I got chills when you said it, because I think that that's something I haven't ever explored as far as like in my conversations, that, this idea of like the gay best friend, it's like how as an accessory. Wow, that's such a powerful way to put it. Yeah, I want to also say I'm so sorry that you had to go through that and that you have that. Yeah, oh my gosh.
I have a feeling Stephen handled it pretty well, but
absolutely, 100%. I wanted to ask you, Robin, have you noticed you being treated differently pre and post transition? And again, pre and post being, arbitrary words here. Because,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So definitely, even for as masculine as I presented, as a female, per se, what I get now is vastly different, mostly from, I believe, cisgender men. Because as a masculine female, as a masculine kind of person before, I was just kind of perceived as a gay female or as a lesbian. And therefore, I felt like women overall, we had the same relationship kind of that I do now. But for men, now that I present masculine and I sound masculine, what I get from cisgender men is inclusion. This silent inclusion that I did not have before. And it's almost like you have to experience it to know it, but I think that you can probably kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. But I can literally walk through the store or down the street or whatever and get that, Steven's smiling, get that nod and that, heads up thing. And, and when folks, are speaking to me either on the phone or if it's a service call at my house and having something worked on, whatever, the language is completely different. I'm treated completely different. Trying to think of, I get bro a lot and brother and, and I'm just treated completely different. Well, one of the things that I didn't see coming with this, that I'm learning about, and it's actually kind of weird and scary, is I didn't realize that for me, the power that came with this, with transitioning to being more masculine. I did not, like, that's not in the handbook that you get when you transition, right? Like, people had to tell me about that. And I had to be open to hear that. And I was floored. I was like, what? But it's true. And I didn't know it before. It wasn't there before. But I can see it now. And
so power as in people, I'm almost hearing like acknowledgement or just maybe you said they kind of react a little differently, like on the phone and things like that. How are you feeling about this?
So that's a new layer of stuff to learn about, right? About myself that I didn't see coming. So I'm weirdly excited about learning about it and then breaking it down, like, and not exhibiting those behaviors and not being that expected, I don't know what the word would be, but not owning that power, right? Like breaking that down and trying to give it back. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but I really like see it now, like, whole masculine and feminine and where that power imbalance comes from.
We're kind of talking about the male privilege, right? Because now you're at the point where you're being perceived by your peers
as masculine.
You're included. So now you're starting to see some of that male privilege. And so I don't know that you can give it back, but you can certainly use it for good.
Yes. That's definitely what I want to do. And that's why I'm talking about it. Like, because it wasn't, it was never, ever like something that I thought about, which is surprising to me now. I think, oh my gosh, how can I not think about this? But you don't know what you don't know.
That is so incredible. I really appreciate you sharing that. It is really eye-opening. And I think that it just kind of digs in more into kind of what these gender boxes really look like. And moving even further, I would even suggest, I asked, like, do you think that, women who play into the masculine are less, that's less of a surprise to society than men kind of playing into the feminine or, expressing themselves more feminine. And I think it kind of comes to this idea of within these gender boxes, there is one that is assigned as lesser. And I think that we can argue that the feminine is seen as the lesser. And so when people stray out of the gender boxes, but maybe they stray into more of the masculine, maybe that is seen as less of an affront or less of a shock than if someone is more into the feminine expression. So I think that this is kind of like the root of it here, is this kind of misogynistic culture that we're kind of in right now. And it hurts everyone. And I think I want to highlight that too, even though we're seeing like this misogynistic, piece to it, it hurts everyone. No one's able to be their authentic selves. And that's why it's super important that we support people as them, because then we can together break down this cultural phenomenon that we're experiencing.
Whether you realize it or not, almost every individual, at least in the United States, is experiencing some level or form of misogyny and sexist behavior.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can I just put that on a plaque, please? Stephen, we talk a lot on this podcast about the effects of trauma and how they can affect someone. Particularly, we highlight that survivors can feel powerless or that their power was taken away from them. So with that, how can the added pressures of conforming to gender stereotypes further take someone's agency away?
So like Robin mentioned earlier, they start to develop this identity of their gender at a very early age. And society is all around us. So you have the family, you have their church, you have their community. Everywhere around them is telling them that the way you're expressing is not the way you're supposed to be expressing yourself. So as this person or individual is growing older, they're learning that they have to suppress that side of themselves. They have to hold back that side in order to fit in just that little bit, just a little bit enough to get through. In regard to autonomy and sense of agency, the misconceptions can be broken down and reconstructed for the client so that they can regain that sense of autonomy and have a better connection with who they are, what they identify as, and how they choose to express themselves. Because if they're not accepting of who they are themselves, it's going to be really hard for them to present their best self to someone else.
Absolutely. I'm hearing safe space, honestly, the safety that they can be themselves. And then kind of from there, they can heal. That makes complete sense. And I wanted to also lean into, how do these gender expectations, and Robin, you can jump in too. How do these gender expectations and gender roles that we put on people contribute to the rape culture that we live in?
There's often the misconception that men aren't raped, that, because a penis has to be hard in order to, perform a sexual act, that men aren't raped. That's not true. It's a bodily function. Just like a woman who is assaulted and can have an orgasm, it's still unconsensual because it's just a simple bodily function. There's also a big misconception that homosexuals or the LGBTQ community are perpetrators and that you can't allow them around children or vulnerable people. In fact, when Hoover created the FBI, he said that all homosexuals and gays were communists, and even sent out flyers to households to warn them that these communists are coming in and, all this different stuff. And so now we're living with that culture of an ostracized community. I get going and I lose track of where I was going.
Go, rant, go.
And the other side of that is, men who are in prison deserve to be raped. Let's not forget that these are people too. No one deserves to be raped. No one deserves to have that kind of boundaries broken. And beyond that, we tend to blame the woman. Oh, what was she wearing? What did she say? She acted interested. You can be interested in someone, go out on a date with them and have no expectation of being raped. You can also, if you have voluptuous breasts and you like them as one of your assets, that is not an invitation to be raped. You have the right and the agency to express yourself the way you choose.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And I know that rape culture is such a complicated topic to dive into. And I appreciate you uplifting the idea that, anyone can be a survivor. And that's really important that we break down that myth that men aren't sexually assaulted. I think that can also move on to, supporting male survivors, because there's this idea of, since you were sexually assaulted, which is in my social script only happens to women, then you must be more feminine. And then in my social script of the gender box, that means that you're lesser, that means that you're weaker. It's just it all snowballs. And it kind of just, go ahead, Stephen.
Because of those societal stigmas and pressures, I find that my male clients have the hardest times coming to terms with that, because there's such a great deal of shame and guilt because they, I should have been able to do this or that, or why did I let this happen to me? Well, the reality is what were you going to do? Like, you're not a violent person. You're not going to retaliate in that kind of way, and it's just, I find that it's a lot harder for men to deal with that emotional side of it when it's in the recovery of healing.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of expectations, and in our social script, it's like the male is the perpetrator, the female is the victim, which a lot of times it is, of course, but it's important that we highlight and break down that myth, and then also address these gender norms, and kind of untangle them too, right? And just, we have a lot of work to do, but we can do it. I believe in us.
It's a crime. It is a crime. So if someone broke into your house, you wouldn't say, well, did you leave your door unlocked? Did you have a sign out that you had a new TV or what? Like, it's a crime. So why would we look at that any different than we would any other crime in the handbook?
Absolutely. And speaking of, what can we do, right? So what can we do as a society to break down these rigid and harmful expectations that we put on people based on their sex assigned at birth?
I mean, I think that, first and foremost, if we can open our minds and try to look at each person that we interact with as just a human being, like start there. No expectation of male, female, pink, blue, black, white, purple, like this is a human being that I'm interacting with, respecting them as a human being, respecting their boundaries, respecting their right to express who they are, however they decide that they want to do that. And again, that's kind of the ego, like for us to accept someone, that's the ego thing too, right? Like, if I'm not accepting you, I have a problem with it, then I'm making a judgment that you're doing something wrong, right? Or out of the norm. So I think there's a lot of work to be done as a society to accept people where they are, meet people where they are, and just as a baseline, as human beings, and respect them for that. For who they are, where they are, not try to change them, not oppress, this whole cultural, just holding people down and trying to change them. Like, holding people down when they shoot out the side, like, they're not changing. They're not coming out different. And that, I mean, when we look at especially youth and young adult suicide in the LGBT community, and especially trans youth, like that's what you see. That's where we see youth be experiencing homelessness, either before 18 or right at 18, right? Because in the family unit that they're in, if they're not affirmed and they can't be who they are, they're holding all that in, or they're hiding all that, either out of fear to tell, or if they know if they tell, like, they're going to pay for it, right? Or the parents say, you can't be who you want to be and be in my house. You turn 18, you're gone, right? So they're hiding all that, and what that's doing is creating, all of that emotional stress, and that's where all the mental health stuff starts to come into play, and we see, self-harming behavior, we see substance use, we see depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. I mean, that just doesn't show up. Like, these youth are experiencing trauma.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you saying, like, meeting someone where they are, because we were talking about, like, the fluidity of it too. And I think that if we just kind of see the person as a person, that can mean the world, and also start changing the culture really. And you talked about youth. So I wanted to ask you, Raman, have you seen any strides toward this change happen over the past few years? Have you seen any strides specifically in that generation? And then Stephen, you can hop in as well.
I mean, I do. It's funny when you talk to probably the under 30 crowd, 25 or under 25 crowd, like this is not an issue for them,
Yeah.
right? Like the youth that I work with, the most age range is 18 to 24 right now, but Zebra serves 13 to 24. So we see youth, you know, from 13 on up, and like it's not an issue for them. It's not it's our older society that really has, you know, all this expectation of what things used to be like, you know, and this again, you know, I take it back to the fear of change, the fear of the unknown. And youth are really and you know, kind of, we're queer and we're here, that's it. Like that's the one word that they want to use, which is also, you know, it's funny because you know, depending on which generation you're from, that can be a derogatory term, and the youth have kind of reclaimed that as a really a power word now, right? It's very affirming for them. And I mean, I use it because like if we were trying to break it down now, like, am I straight? Am I gay? Like, what? I'm just queer. Like, I don't even want to go there. I don't even want to try to explain this to somebody, you know?
Yeah. Why does there have to be a category?
Yeah.
I'm just me, right?
Right.
You bring up a really good point. It's human nature for us to want to categorize things, right? Like that's just how we make sense of the world around us. But I do believe our society has evolved to a point now where we can move beyond that for gender, right? Like we've established that categorizing things helps us process and understand the world around us, but we also know that gender is not black or white. It's so much more than that. And there's way more of a gray area than there really is black or white.
Absolutely. And I think that the more that we kind of back up and just start to, I invite whoever is listening, just kind of look around and start analyzing the world around you and see, like, is this being gendered? Is this, you know, what's going on, and where is this coming from? And because when I was first brought to light as far as this topic in college, I couldn't not see it after that. And then once you kind of see it, maybe address it, maybe kind of understand the implications of it, the problems of it, how the harm that it can do for people, and then invite you to just, you know, use people's pronouns that they, you know, have. And then also, you know, try to challenge yourself and be like, why am I expecting this from this person when, you know, am I just expecting it because society's telling me that this is the social script for, you know, quote unquote male, female, things like that. I wanted to ask you, Robin, you know, as a gender neutral transmasculine person, or gender non-binary transmasculine person, what is the best way a person can support and respect your identity?
My gosh, it seems so simple. Just respect me, meet me, you know, just like we talked about, meet me where I am, respect me for who I am, and what I bring to the table, you know. And I think also not holding these rigid guidelines, because even for myself, you know, when I really started to embrace who I am, you know, I would say, oh, I'm not gonna do this, or I'm not gonna do that. Well, I've done those things, you know, as my journey has progressed and this organic change has happened within me, these things have changed, you know. So even for myself, I had to take a look at that and be like, you know, am I okay with this? Like, where am I with, like, this is who I am, right? And so trust me that I know who I am, right? and then just go with that. Like, okay, I'm a human being. I have feelings, whether I'm masculine or feminine. I'm going to show those feelings, whether I'm masculine or feminine. I'm a unique individual as a human being. I bring my unique self to the table. You know, affirm me for who I am. I will affirm you and respect you for who you are.
I love that. Thank you so much, Robin. I think that that's super important information. Stephen, how can we support individuals to live as their authentic selves?
I would say check your preconceived notions at the door, right? and your expectations as well. Like, just because I present as a male, that doesn't mean you understand all the ins and outs of who I am and how I function as a human being. And just like with any other person, take the time to get to know me and, explore those different facets of myself that you would with any other person. Just, it may be a little different than with another person, than say if it was with a straight person, but just throughout the process, be respectful, and it will be a mutual respect and a great experience.
I love that. And I think that even kind of can open up the door for people to look inward and figure out, oh, how do I actually want to express myself? It's okay to express myself the way that I feel is authentic to me, and challenge that within you as well. Before we sign off, is there anything else you would like to add that we may not have addressed, or anything you'd like to say to anyone listening, including like gender nonconforming or non-binary, people fighting the good fight, survivors, things like that?
I would just say, as a person, like, challenge yourself to break down any of those biases that we have that are kind of inherent. I think we grow up, with, and we don't know that they're there, right? And I mean, I've definitely experienced that as going through this kind of evolution, and it's really opened my eyes to change, like how you can change, right? And being open to what people have to say, I think, that's not harming, right? So if someone has something to have a conversation about, and it's not coming at you in a harmful way, like being open to hear that, because like the whole thing with the masculine power and all, like I would have never known that if someone hadn't brought it to my attention. Like I didn't see it. I'm taking credit for that. Like somebody else saw it, brought it to my attention, and I was like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have known, So being open to having those discussions and conversations with folks, I think, and as far as gender nonconforming individuals, all of us fighting the good fight, right? And survivors, like keep on keeping on, right? Like we need to be here.
Yeah. Support the entire community.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that you brought that up, Robin, because that was one of the points that I wanted to make, is that, gender nonconforming people, especially in the trans community, face so much more oppression, because you can, for example, like myself, be completely masculine presenting. I don't want a surgery. I don't want to do any of that stuff so that I would represent as a female. But I'm expected to, because I identify as a female. So I am then not only rejected by my community, but by society as well, because I don't have breasts and hips and the correct genitalia.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of work to be done on the forefront of gender norms and transgendered individuals who are non-conforming.
Absolutely. And it's there, that's another area. That's a good point, Stephen. Thank you. Because that's another area that, talk about challenging. Okay. Someone who uses feminine pronouns, but presents as masculine or as a male, right? And people are like, why would they do that? Well, A, they just might, that's how they might want to present. B, maybe they just haven't been able to afford to transition socially, right? So they can't afford the clothes that they would really like to wear. They can't afford the surgery that they would really like to have. They can't afford the hormones that they would really like to take. Doesn't mean we can't respect who they are as a person and how they feel about their identity, just because on the outside they don't look like the way we think they should. Right.
Absolutely.
And it's challenging in the respect that our brains are so trained to gender. So if you look at someone and you see facial hair and you see masculine clothes, you immediately think he.
Yep.
Like your brain just does it. And it literally, it's like retraining your brain to stop and look at each person individually and think about, well, okay, what are my pronouns here? What are their pronouns?
Absolutely. It is. And I would invite, because you mentioned the question of like, well, why would they do that? Right. That's kind of what people ask. I invite people, instead of thinking that question, maybe ask yourself, why does it matter?
Why is it bothering you?
Why is it
Yes.
bothering you? And then it could be, it very well is probably society is telling you that this is how it should be. And then break that down. And you absolutely have the power to do it. That's what's so exciting about this, in my opinion, is that we can really make a social change.
As we go through all of these little, and I'm going to call them mini movements within the LGBTQ community, for example, you saw like a little burst of people being able to come out as, gay and lesbian. And as time went on, people were able to come out as trans and non-binary, especially with social media. So, oh, they're just doing it for attention. I'm sorry that no one would put themselves through that. That's not, you're not getting good attention. It's a lot of oppression and stigmatization. So I also want to like kind of debunk that if we can, because it is not for attention. It is simply the way that an individual is trying to and wanting to express themselves. If it's causing a reaction within you, maybe you should look within yourself and figure out why you're having a reaction rather than putting the blame on that other person.
Absolutely. And then just start the conversation like we're having now, with people around you, and just start changing the culture, because, we didn't create the culture, but we're keeping it alive, and we can change it because it wasn't always here too. Right. So I think that is a wonderful place to sign off. So thank you for listening to the Victim Service Center podcast. The VSC is a nonprofit organization that provides free, confidential counseling services for victims of any kind of trauma in Central Florida. To learn more about our services, please visit victimservicecenter.org. And to everyone listening, healing is not linear and you are not alone. And thank you so much, Robin and Stephen, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Absolutely.